after all that, we can start, I hope. Hope the police don't turn up again. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankarvavahe Tejasvinavadidhamastu ma vitvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti. Okay. So a shortened class today because we've still got to finish at the same time. Any questions on anything before we start with the text? Okay. So we are on page 50. Captive of the mind. So this particular section, or this particular chapter, is called Born in Captivity. Right? So what it's describing is the various ways in which human life is limited. Right? So the purpose of this philosophy is to bring us back to our inherent nature, which is freedom. You know, the analogy that we've often used is, if you look at the physical body, whatever you do to the physical body, it always takes itself in the direction of health. You know, you have too much to drink, you cut yourself, whatever it happens, the body goes back to that direction of health. So you could say then that health is the natural state of the physical body. It's its natural state, always trying to get back there. Even as we get older, our capacity to heal and fight off disease gets less and less and less until at some point we succumb and we die. But even at that point, the body's still trying to do the same thing, which is get back to health. It never says, no, I'm shutting down now, and turns everything off. It's still trying. It just fails because it doesn't have the capacity. And so in the same way, we can say that the natural state of the subjective experience is freedom. That being the case, then we need to understand what are the limitations on our freedom. What are the things that keep us captive? Right? And so he was going through a number of those in the beginning of this chapter, and he continues with captive of the mind. He says, your vastness manifest as your mind and intellect, and your personality is a faithful expression of your vastness, your mind and intellect, your emotions and thoughts. Vastness form the seed that produces the mind and its emotions, the intellect and its thoughts. And the personality is, in effect, a portrayal of the mind and intellect. If your mind is kind and benevolent, you would be kind and benevolent. If your mind is cruel and destructive, so would you be. Similarly, if your intellect entertains communist thoughts and ideas, you'd be a communist. And if your intellect is replete with capitalist ideas, you become a capitalist. Okay, so this is then a description of the personality. When we talk about what a person's personality is, we're talking about their mind and intellect. What's he like? What's she like? Those qualities and properties, he's lovely, very nice fellow. Or he's very kind of rude and arrogant, and he's straight down there, he's a straight shooter. He's a smart guy, he knows what he's talking about. Whatever we describe, we're describing the mind and intellect when it comes to the personality. So the personality then is an effect. It's an effect of something else. And he's using this word here, vasanas. So the word vasanas, the Sanskrit root of the word vasanas is vas, which means scent, smell, fragrance. So each person has their own particular fragrance. They've got their own particular quality to them, to themselves, to their personality. So the vastness then is the seed. He uses this term here. In fact, the term vastness also can be described as seed body. So you put a seed in the ground, it sprouts, it grows, it becomes a plant. The quality and the nature of that plant will be determined by whatever seed it was. You don't put an apple seed in the ground and get a mango tree. Right? In the same way, the personality that we express is the tree. The cause of that is the vasanas. Right? So what he's doing in this paragraph is sort of giving the etiology of your own mind and intellect. How does it arise? Right, so it arises from the vasanas. And so this is why he, elsewhere in one of the other texts, he says the vasanas are the unmanifest, the dormant tendencies of the personality, which become manifest, which have rise or give rise to particular expressions of who and what you are. Now he goes on to just sort of describe here that whatever your mind and intellect is, that's what it is. You can't be anything other than what you are. If you are, he talks about here, kind and benevolent. If that's the nature of your mind, because that's the nature of your vasanas, then that's the personality that you're stuck in, as it were. The mold has been cast, has been poured in and cracked. That's what's come out. That's the nature of your mind and intellect, according to that. And so in that sense, we're captive to our own personalities. We can't be what we are not. Continues. There is also a general tendency to fall a prey to one's likes and dislikes. Your mind is full of likes and dislikes which you have collected from early childhood. With the lack of development of the intellect, you follow in the wake of your mind. You do what you like and avoid what you dislike. Both your indiscriminate pursuit of likes and dislikes and discard of dislikes prove detrimental to your well-being towards the end. Thus you become a captive of your mind and suffer the consequences. To get out of this victimization, you need to develop the intellect. A strong intellect alone can circumvent the influence of the mind's attractions and repulsions and guide you towards a progressive and peaceful path in life. Okay, so the nature of the mind has these different aspects. Right? One of them is likes and dislikes. Nothing per se wrong with likes and dislikes. I like rice, I don't like bread. I like cold weather, I don't like hot weather. There's nothing right or wrong about that. I like dogs, I don't like cats. It's just the nature of your own mind. As he says, these are the vasanas, this is the caste that's being created. So having likes and dislikes is not a problem. The problem is when we function on likes and dislikes. And this is what he's describing here. When we have an impulse, as a reaction to a particular environment, some sort of stimulus, what we tend to do is go with that. The problem is that the thing that we like and the thing that we dislike bear no necessary connection to what's actually in our best interests. But the problem is that because we lack an intellect, or we lack intellectual development, whatever the mind throws up, we tend to believe what it's telling us, in a sense. So we conflate what we like with what is good. We conflate what we dislike with what is bad. I don't like it. You see this in young children. If they have an immediate sort of intuitive reaction, I don't like it, you can see that they think it's bad. It's bad, I don't want it, Now, the exact same thing is happening in us as adults. The difference is that we don't have that same sort of visceral expression of it. We're a bit more socially mature than that, if not intellectually mature. We don't react in the same way externally. But internally the same thing is happening. I don't like it, therefore I reject it. I like it, therefore I take it. It's good. It's inherently good because I like it. This is a little bit like this quote by George Bernard Shaw. I think it's George Bernard Shaw. He says, patriotism is the conviction that my country is the best because I was born in it. And basically that's what it is. I like my country, and so it's the greatest country in the world. So it's this idea of what we like, we immediately conflate as being good. So the effect of this is obvious. You can think up any one of 100 examples where the thing that we like is not the thing that is in our best interests, and the thing that we dislike is in our best interests. So the job of the intellect is to question. That's its basic function. So when the reaction to the external environment comes up, I like it. Fine. There's no problem with liking something. The problem is not whether you like it or not. The problem is whether or not you connect to that like and then use it as the propulsion to act. This is it's quite interesting because you talk to people who are sort of on this path or someone on paths of self-development, and there is a deep frustration with the fact that they have certain tendencies. I like gambling. Right? Just stick with an example. I want to be a good human being. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. And here I go wasting my money on gambling. But the problem is that part of the problem is that they condemn the liking per se. I'm such a bad person for liking gambling. Well, okay, you like gambling, big deal. That's not the issue. The issue is that you allow the like to determine your actions thereafter. If you like it, you like it. There's nothing you can do about that. Actually, over time, there is something you can do about that. But in the short term, there's nothing you can do about it. You're captive of your mind. If you like gambling today, if you're an inveterate gambler, you can't expect in one day, in 1 month, in 1 year to not like gambling anymore. But what we can do is implement ways of disconnecting from likes and dislikes. So this is what we need to do, is to disconnect. Now, disconnecting does not mean suppressing. Right? We're not trying to run away from our experiences. It just means that we're mature enough to not let them guide us. Okay, I like gambling, but I'm not going to do it. Right? And there's different ways and means of ensuring that when we do that, we don't become frustrated. But basically speaking, this is the job of the intellect, is to question what is the reaction going on within me? What's the trigger? What's going on out there? I've just come across, World Series of Poker on TV. I'm just flicking through the channels, and there it is. $1 million, Vegas. That was a stimulus. Receipt of stimulus. Reaction within their personality. The reaction is, it jumps on my like, and bang, there is the reaction, gambling. That thrill. Now what? That's the question. That's the trigger. This is the reaction. If we can question, what am I experiencing? Why am I experiencing it? What's the quality and the nature of it? What's it asking me to do? Why would I? Why wouldn't I? What's the good? What would be a reason to do it? What would be a reason not to do it? When would it be appropriate? When would it not be appropriate? You start to view the situation from a perspective that is outside of the like or dislike. The problem is that we view the situation from within the like or dislike. So we're in its bubble, and it gets filtered through the lens of our like, and comes out as it's good. The way to manage the like or dislike is to view it from outside of that perspective. The mind cannot get itself out of its own perspective. That's the job of the intellect. And it's done, again, by observation, by questioning, and by reasoning. That's how we shift gears out of mind and into intellect. So it's a rising above the mind, not a squashing down of the mind. It's a common mistake, though, when we first start to try and practice self-control, that we kind of don't always get it right in the initial stages and end up suppressing ourselves. All right, okay. To an extent, you've still got to expect that, but just be aware of it and understand what suppression is and how to get out of it. Anytime we use the term self-control, it has the implication of taking us towards a healthier state. Right? The moment it takes us into something unhealthy, it's no longer self-control. Now it's self-denial. Now it's suppression. So a strong intellect can circumvent the influence of the mind's attractions. So this is how you circumvent. The mind has that immediacy to it. I like it. You've got to circumvent that, just to break the circuit. He says, besides the tendency to yield to likes and dislikes, people fall an easy prey to the mind's attachment and possessiveness to worldly objects and beings. The human mind becomes deeply attached to the members of the family. The love spouses claim to possess for each other is actually attachment. The husband is attached to his wife, so is the wife attached to her husband. Attachment means love coupled with self-centeredness, selfishness. When love is mingled with self-interest, selfishness, it turns sour. The mind then develops attachment, possessiveness, and spells disaster. Spouses attached, possessive in their relationship, caught in estrangement, separation, which invariably ends in divorce. So I've heard them say this any number of times. The cause of divorce is attachment. Now, there may be a range of other sort of extenuating factors and sort of, other causes which have come in and exacerbated the problem. But the fundamental cause is attachment. All the other pressures and factors which are coming in, they can be managed if we're not attached. The problem is that the presence of attachment means that all of the other factors, all of the other problems, all of the other issues cannot be managed. And so we say, irreconcilable differences. No. You will always have irreconcilable differences with another human being, unless you have the exact same mind as that person. Well, you're never going to find two people who have, the exact same mind. There's always going to be differences. We call them irreconcilable when we're unable to accommodate, and that comes from the attachment. So the whole idea of attachment is that there's another person. So he says objects and beings, all right? So you can become attached to objects in the world as well. You become attached to your car, or you can become attached to non-tangibles like status or position. But we'll stick to people because that's the context of the paragraph. There is a sense of love, which is what? What is love?
Selflessness.
Selflessness. What else? If you love someone, what does it mean? What's your relationship with that person?
You're attached to them.
No, you're not.
You're detached.
Correct. If you love them, you are not attached.
Selflessness minus detachment, minus attachment. Love minus attachment. Sorry. I know where you're going with this. It's in here somewhere.
So love then is another word that we often use to define love is identification. Right? So identification means that you identify with that thing. In this case, that thing is a person. You identify with them. Think of it this way. At the moment you identify with yourself, your body's going through certain things, that's happening to me. Your mind is going through certain things, that's me. Your intellect is going through certain things, it's me. You're identifying with yourself and your demands and your experiences. To identify with another person means that now you go through their experiences. So what it means is that whatever their physical, emotional, and intellectual experiences are, you partake of that. You, in a sense, vicariously draw their qualities and you enjoy them yourself. So you identify with that other person. Beautiful qualities. He's upstanding, and she's very kind and compassionate, and this person's very smart and intelligent. Whatever. You've got these beautiful qualities. So you identify with those, you resonate with them, you partake of them. That's the love aspect. It becomes attachment when you say, I want. It's when you try to satisfy your own demands through that relationship. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have demands in the relationship. Of course you do. You get into a relationship because you have certain demands. If you didn't have demands that needed to be met by another human being, then there's no reason to get married. If you're perfectly self-sufficient without demands, then marriage is not a necessity. So the reason we get into a marriage is because we have areas of our personality that need support. And so there's a complementary, supplementary aspect to a marriage. So it's not that we should deny the reasons that we got into the relationship. What we're talking about here is the attitude while we're in it. If the attitude is one of, I'm trying to take from the relationship to satisfy my demands, then it becomes attachment. Right? So it's the idea of taking. If that's the general direction of your emotion, is to take, then it becomes attachment. The problem with this is, there's a number of problems. One of them is that when that person, for whatever reason, does not meet your demands, what happens?
Mental anguish.
Mental agitation, yeah. If that person doesn't meet my expectations and my demands, I suffer. That person's just being who they are. That being is functioning helplessly according to their vasanas. And here I'm the one suffering because they're being who they are. It doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense when you recognize that it's my expectation, it's my attachment. I want. This context here is spouses. The next paragraph, he talks about children. We've used this example before. One of our class members was discussing this idea of looking down at a newborn and saying, my life now has so much meaning and so much purpose. Now, there's nothing wrong with that feeling. But the moment you start to use the relationship for your sense of meaning and purpose, you're putting yourself in a precarious position. You are now susceptible to having that feeling turn into disappointment, turn into frustration, if the child at some point no longer needs you, which hopefully is going to be the case. Your job as a parent is to make yourself redundant so that I'm no longer necessary. But if you've become dependent upon that relationship for a sense of meaning, then when you make yourself redundant, you also make yourself miserable, empty nest syndrome. Or worse, you don't make the child self-sufficient, you keep the child in a state of needing you so that you can continue to fulfill the demand. Now, again, we've discussed this also. It's not that we've got, evil parents doing what they can to, take for themselves and I don't care about my children. It's not that at all. From the parent's perspective, it's genuine affection. It feels like love. I don't know if we've come across it yet, but in this text there is an example of there's an example of I believe it was a son in India, a bit of a prodigy when it comes to mathematics. He was able to, understand it in ways that people couldn't. So he achieved a scholarship to go and study abroad. The parents said, no, he's our only son. He needs to be here with us. He should not go abroad. This incredible opportunity to follow his nature, his passion, his love, in a place that would spur his growth, fully paid for, he should be with us. That's attachment. I want the son to be with us. I'm dependent upon that relationship for my sense of well-being. What happens then is they said no. He misses out. He's the one who suffers. Now, from the parents' perspective, it wasn't that they were saying, I don't care about my son, I'm just going to have what I want. From their perspective, it didn't feel that way. From their perspective, it felt like genuine affection. So attachment doesn't feel like something negative to us while we're in it. It just feels this is what love is. This is what relationship is. We only become aware that it might be negative when the other person ceases to act in ways that satisfy our demands. Then we get frustrated. But then, of course, what do? It's your fault. You're not being nice enough or kind enough or outgoing enough or X, Y, Z enough. We point the finger of blame at the other person if there's the problem. Now, you may actually be correct. The person may not be living up to their obligations. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is that I am becoming frustrated and pointing the blame there, rather than saying, well, what is the cause of my frustration? That's the trigger. My partner being not XYZ enough, that's the trigger. But the cause is my attachment. Attachment must therefore be something negative. If it's creating this disharmony in the relationship and it's creating negative emotional states in me, then it must, in a sense, be negative. But we don't look at that. So we've sort of got to recalibrate. We pick up passively from the external environment what attachment is, and we call it love. We get it from friends and loved ones. They are attached to us, and so we learn, okay, this is what a spouse relationship is. We learn that this is the case, and if you're not satisfying my demands, there's something wrong, and there's a problem, and you need to sort it out. So we learn that. We learn it from external sources. Give us your favourite love song lyric. It's probably something that is talking more about attachment. Can't live if living is without you.
I've got tears in my ears from lying on my back and crying over you.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a real song in the 80s.
Love hurts, apparently. All these ideas. Life began again the day you took my hand. Terrible, terrible, terrible lyrics. These are the ones that should be banned. Because what they're basically doing is they are celebrating a weakness. Now, okay, we shouldn't be too critical. There's a romantic ideal which is being conveyed fine, but the message that's coming across here is that if I can't be happy without you, then that's love. It's talking about an emotional weakness, lack of psychological self-sufficiency. So, the analogy we sometimes talk about is change the lyrics around and make it at the physical level. I can't stand upright unless you're there. I can't walk up the stairs without you propping up my spine. It's beautiful, isn't it?
I don't think it'd be a top 10 hit, though.
I don't think it'd be a top 10 hit. If you said, if you wrote a card to your beloved, or you're courting someone, I don't think I'll be able to walk properly. I can't carry my books to school unless you're there to help me do it. This is the way to a girl's heart. No, I don't want a weak man. I can't live if living is without you. I can't be happy unless you're near me. It's attachment. So we need to recalibrate. That feeling that we're having, that we're calling love, we need to recognize that it's something else. Like a lot of things in life. Just because we like it and it feels good doesn't mean it's good for us. So we've got to recalibrate. That feeling I'm getting, I have to now put that into the category of negative. Whereas I used to put it in the category of good. I've got to shift into a different category now and relearn that this feeling that I have right now, as pleasant as it feels, in this moment, I've got to start calling it unpleasant. How pleasant does it feel to scratch a wound that's healing? Fantastic, so good. Bad for you, bad for the wound, bad for the healing. How good does it feel to stew over a wrongdoing that someone did to you? Fantastic. Because when you know they're in the wrong, I was in the right, they were in the wrong, you know what he did? A sense of superiority. That thinking about him getting his comeuppance. Oh, delicious. Right? But not healthy. Lots of things are delicious and not healthy. So it's a matter of recalibrating our feelings and our emotions. So it's understanding what attachment is. Love that has been vitiated is the word he uses elsewhere, by attachment, by selfishness. I want. So it doesn't mean that we don't allow our needs to be fulfilled. Right? Again, we're not denying ourselves the fulfillment of our genuine needs that we go into a relationship for. But it's the attitude that we use to relate to that person. If it's based on attachment, we'll suffer, we'll put pressure on the other person, and we leave ourselves open to disappointment. So then, as you were saying, attachment equals love plus selfishness. So love equals attachment minus selfishness. So this gives us the method. Right? The natural tendency of the mind that has not been properly trained is to, I want, I want, I want. The method then is the removal of selfishness, which again is the intellect. You circumvent that mind's tendency using the intellect. And we talk about love as this beautiful feeling, and it is a beautiful feeling. What we don't talk enough about is that it is an intellectual phenomenon. Without the intellect, there is no love. In the Fall of the Human Intellect, he has that quote. You must therefore develop and use your intellect to protect and preserve your love. So the way to do it in general is minus selfishness, which is an attitude. If selfishness is, what can I get? And it's very natural, it's very easy for us. We don't have to put effort into being selfish. But we do have to put effort into being unselfish. What does this person need? What does this circumstance need? What can I offer right now to this person? And again, the answer sometimes may be nothing. They need this, but I definitely can't provide it. That's not the point. The point is that the moment we ask that question, it's conscious thought force. And we're turning the direction of our attention around now. Instead of like, what can I get? It's okay, what do you need? And
you're always going to get it wrong.
Yeah, and you're always going to get it wrong. So that's fine. Don't worry about getting it wrong.
The intention, not actually about the action.
The intention is the only thing that matters. That doesn't mean you get complacent and say, I don't care what the outcome is. Mm-hmm. If you say, this person needs me, this person's in a bad, feeling sad, they need me to come and have a heart-to-heart and talk about it. And you have your heart-to-heart, what's wrong, what's going on, are you okay? And you make the whole thing worse because you just get them to run around in circles in their own mind. What you should have done is walk up and say, snap out of it, man. But you made the wrong choice, fine. It doesn't mean you don't care about the result. Okay, I tried, that didn't work. What happened? What else could I have done? Asking him what was wrong just made him worse. Maybe I should have diverted his attention into something else. Instead of going into his problem, maybe I should have got him out. So you do think about the effect and always try and learn more about the person and the proper way to relate. But in terms of just wanting to circumvent the selfishness of the mind, it's the intention that matters. And you'll find that when you have a consistent attitude of, okay, what can I offer? Your own demands will be met. We're not talking about some, magical, mystical, cosmic justice thing here. What we're saying is that the moment you have an unselfish attitude in a relationship, that pressure to have your demands met just diminishes. It just gets blown away. The thing that you want, by giving it to others, you also partake of it. The satisfaction that you give, that you allow another person to experience. There's a great line in a Neil Young song. He says, peace of mind like when you treated her kind. He's talking about a breakup. He says, okay, there's certain things you can get from it, but there's one thing you haven't got. Peace of mind like when you treated her kind. This idea that when you treat the other person properly, you develop a peace of mind. And so this feeling of my demands are not met, it just disappears, it dissipates. And of course, there is a natural reciprocity to these things. Think of it from the other perspective. If you have a partner who genuinely you see is like looking out for your interests, and they want to serve your growth, and they want you to be happy, healthy, and successful, and all the rest of it, what's your natural response? Pour it straight back. You can't help it. And when you see that, it's the way he uses it in one of the other texts. He says, love is reciprocal. When you see another person treating you with love, it's impossible for you not to just naturally want to give it back. And so if you do that, then it will come back from the cosmic justice perspective. It's a human psychological perspective. If you're nice to others, they like you, they're nice back to you. It's simple. And when it's genuine. Right? We're not nice to others in order to get them to be nice back, because then you're not being nice to others. You're being nice to yourself.
Is anybody else thinking of the magic penny? Love is something if you give it away.
Yeah.
More.
For us, actually, I learned that in school, it was a smile.
What's that again?
When we had learned the same song in school,
Yeah.
but it wasn't love, it was a smile.
Oh.
A smile is something you can give it away and it comes right back to you.
Uh-huh.
To the children.
Yeah.
I'll have to start singing that in the classes. Maybe not singing. I'll just quote the line. But yeah, it's a good kid's song. He continues. So that was with regards to spouses. He says, children suffer the most from the parents' treatment. The parents' attachment and possessiveness suffocate them, strangle their lifestyle. The kids wait for their maturity to leave their parents, move away from their homes. Unfortunately, the parents with all the concern and care for their children fail to understand the devastating consequences of their attachment. So again, this idea that if our natural state is to be free, that's not just true for adults. It's also true for kids, for teenagers and preteens and 5-year-olds and 1-year-olds. Everyone wants that feeling of freedom. And when we have, and we discussed this in the earlier part of the text, when we have someone who is kind of at the power end of a relationship and has that, they do have that influence and they can exercise it, constantly telling us, do this, don't do that, function this way, don't function that way, etc., it becomes very oppressive. It becomes a burden, right? The fundamental principle of education is that knowledge is taken, it is not given. And again, with all the, what did he say here? With all concern and care for their children. So when parents are giving that unwanted advice, again, it's not that they're trying to do anything negative. They're trying with all their care and concern to educate the children on what they need to know. If you're going to be online, you need to know these things. If you're going to go out and meet with your friends and strangers, you need to know these things. When you dress a certain way, you're looked at a certain way, you need to learn this. You're trying to educate. The problem is you can't educate someone who doesn't want to listen. It's not possible. Again, what we've said is the best that you can hope for is to be ignored. Usually there's an outright rejection. You don't want me to do that? Okay, I'll do that. It's pretty natural. And so this is why he says children suffer the most, because they don't have the stature or the status or the understanding to push back. When you're riding on your spouse's back with do's and don'ts, it's you leave me alone. Who do you think you are telling me what to do? You can say that to your spouse. Leave me alone. You can't say it to your parents when you're 13, 14, 15 years old. Some kids can. Right, but that doesn't help things. That just creates the tension more. How do you talk to me that way? How can you speak like this to your parents? This sort of idea. So because they lack that position to be able to properly engage and dissent, that's a constant sense of suffering, constant sense of oppression. And so what do? He says, as soon as they can, leave home. I know someone, and I know more than one person, who chose their university because of the distance from the family home. There was one guy in particular I know. He wanted, whatever he wanted, I can't remember what he wanted to study. He could have studied it, say, an hour and a half away. Too close. He went to university, it was an 8-hour drive, say. That was the one he chose, because he knew. Don't want visits on weekends. He wanted to get distance as much as he could. So there's this, it's kind of an unpleasant thought if you're a parent. My children are just waiting till they're old enough to leave home. because of me, The good side of it is that we understand what the cause is. That sense of attachment, of wanting something from the relationship. I want my child to follow my footsteps. I want my child to know what I know. I want my child to learn what I have learned. It's good that you want the child to function in a healthy way, but it's bad when you become dependent upon that. That idea of selfishness or attachment, it's a dependency. So again, it's the question of what does the person actually need? Because we're not stopping to ask that question. We're not functioning with that intellectual boundary between what the mind throws up and what comes out of our mouth. Another example that we've used, this is not related to this, but it highlights what I'm talking about. One person I know who admitted that he had a problem with, telling his family members what to do. All adults, like brothers and brothers-in-law, etc. And he said, I've got this real problem that I'm real judgmental about what my family's choices and their lifestyles and the things they're doing. I said, that is not your problem. By all means, be as judgmental as you like, but just do it inside your head. That guy's wasting his time, wasting his life. Fine, have your opinion. Who cares? No one cares about your opinion. But don't let your opinion tumble out of your mouth. That's the difference, is knowing what the person needs to know is different from knowing whether or not you should tell them. And so the intellect is this buffer. Right? It comes into my head. Am I going to say it? Why would I say it? Does it need to be said? What's likely to happen if I do? What's likely to happen if I don't? And then you decide. And there'll be times where you do have to intercede without them asking for advice. The point is that once you ask the question, you're going to make much better choices. Otherwise, whatever the mind does, bang, out we come with it.
I had this experience this weekend with my son. He was sitting at the table, and I started going on, and I could see his eyes glaze over, and your face appeared in front of me. And said, what did we just talk about?
Oh, I was wondering what that was.
Gotcha for a minute, didn't I? A couple beats, and I turned around and changed direction, got real lighthearted, and he perked up, and we had an interaction. And he got his answers, and I got him what I wanted to say to him, with him paying attention.
Wow.
You did that. What did we just talk about?
Yeah.
It was.
Good.
I have a question, Brian.
Yeah.
This love and attachment thing goes really deep. So what would you say to someone who's in a relationship where they've committed, they've taken vows? We've made up these rules.
Yep.
And there are rules. And in other countries, there's different rules, right? So your wife comes home and says she's fallen in love with someone else. In our society, but what if she says, I want to be with both of you?
So like polyamory or open marriages or that kind of thing.
So it's polyamory. But let's say it's not like you're in a agreed polyamorous relationship. You're not into that. So someone's fallen in love with another person, but they're like, I'd like to figure out how to be with both of you. Mm-hmm. If you're really not attached, it seems like the purest thing would be, okay, you know what I mean?
In that situation, if you're not attached, what it means is that the decision you make will not be based upon your feelings of demand or possessiveness.
Right.
You may decide, no, for whatever reasons, this is not my swadharma, this is not my thing, and I've got other factors which mean that this is not something that I'm going to do. For whatever reasons, right? With all the love in the world, I want you to go off and be happy, but I can't enter into this transaction in this way. Not because you're attached or because you're possessive, but for other reasons. Or you might, as you point out, say, well, okay, I don't claim to be the possessor of your physical and emotional demands.
Does it have anything to do with the decision with these vows and rules? When you get married, you say it's going to be the one. Is that something? So
again,
you want to look to? You know what I mean? That morale. That's what.
The vows are there I mean, for some people, the vows are just the stuff you say to get married, right? They don't have a lot of significance.
Right.
But from the perspective you're talking about, when you do have, you do believe that the vows that you've put forward are principles that you want to live your marriage by, what you do then is you will either use those vows as a means of reevaluating what it is you're in the relationship for. So let's say one of the vows is forsaking all others, for example, right? What does that actually mean? Now, if for you it means a psychologically and sexually monogamous relationship, and you have specific reasons why that's a healthy or important thing for you, then you've got to stay true to those values. Or it might be that that was always my recognition, but to be honest now, that whole idea of claiming ownership or having a boundary around another person's activities, it was definitely adaptive and healthy for me at that time. And as a boundary around our relationship, it was a very healthy thing for us to do. Now it seems like it's not as necessary. Maybe we can expand the definition of what this relationship is, put new boundaries on it, and put new agreements on what we will and we won't do. So how you do it will be dependent upon, if you're not attached, how you do that will be dependent upon what is in the best interests of your own genuine growth needs and the best interests of the relationship.
Well, and of your partner, right? So I have a question too. Using that same scenario, if you have an attitude of service towards your partner, but you believe that lark they want to go off on or something would not be in their best interest, if that lifestyle they're choosing would not be in their best interest, then isn't it your obligation to not agree to it?
It could be, yeah. You could decide that. I mean, you've got to be pretty clear on that. It's always a little. I mean, as a thought experiment, yes, that's absolutely the case. If you know that, look, make it simple. I'm thinking about taking up smoking. I see these people smoking, getting so much happiness out of it. And don't they look so cool and aloof? I could see myself doing that. What do you reckon? No, I think that's a stupid idea. And if you do it, then don't come looking for kisses here. Yeah, you could say that. That's obvious. So if you recognise that the person wants, say, an open relationship, all they're doing is they're just feeding an addiction for novelty, or they're feeding a demand for outside attention, or whatever it is, it's not going to be in their best interest. Then you can say the same thing. No. But the only caveat there is, with the example of smoking, it's obvious. We don't need to. We've got to be a little bit careful in terms of deciding what we think is in another person's best interests. Why? Because we will be attached.
Right.
And so we will conflate, I don't like it, with it's bad. And we will justify it in any one of a number of reasons. Well, but see, isn't it a bad reason because of this, this, and this, and this? So that's the problem, is that if we're attached, our dislike, our sense of possessiveness will be strained when someone says, I want to see other people. Stay with you, but I want to see other people. But you're mine. Now, it's the mindness that is corrosive and toxic. And so when that idea of possessiveness gets strained, there's a negative emotional reaction. I dislike it. And then I will tend to conflate that with, therefore, it's a bad idea. And then what I do is I've already shot the arrow and hit the wall, and then I just go and draw the target around it. Right? I've decided it's not going to happen. All I have to do now is find some justifications for it. And I'll just make a whole range of things up. And if I'm smart, then, I can talk my way through anything. If I'm a good little lawyer, I can talk my way through it and convince the other person. But the whole thing, from my perspective, is now being done only to protect my ego, to protect my attachment and possessiveness. So that's the caveat. But in principle, what you're saying is correct, yes.
It's interesting because it just never seems to work, I mean, people use this idea of non-attachment and these communes and spiritual things of free love and that. And in theory, you'd think if you are more enlightened at a higher stage it should work.
The
But it's
que-
always, it's
yeah.
it's mostly, anyone I've ever known, in those situations, it's an excuse for one person to act out.
The question is, if you are at a level of development, which means that you're genuinely not attached, then you probably don't need another partner. Why do you need to go and have another partner if you're so spiritually evolved? A person who is
Still craving
spiritually and
stuff.
psychologically mature is self-sufficient. If it's different, if the situation is, I know, for example, one partner who was very ill and couldn't function in that domain of the relationship. That's a different thing. But if the relationship has just become a little insipid or mundane because of over familiarity, it's just, as you say, it's an excuse to act out, and it's not going to work. So the very fact that the person needs it indicates their level of development. And then to put on top of that a justification of, but we're detached. And we really want to exercise, we just really want to push our boundaries and explore our boundaries of our own, what I claim as possession and so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
It's just
I've
talk.
never seen it work. I mean, it's just a curious thing, because in some ways it always, as society gets more liberal in certain, marriage and all different things, that idea gets explored a lot. And
Yeah.
to me, the people I know who do it, or just my view of it, is that just gets tricky, and people, but it doesn't, I don't see it working, but I also feel like, in a sense, there's a real truth to it that it could work. And
It could work.
but yeah,
But you
there's
do
that-
have to be very detached,
Yeah.
relatively detached.
Yeah, you do. Which
Yeah.
most,
Either relatively detached or have grown up in an environment in which, that kind of monogamy isn't necessarily the strict norm. If you've grown up in an environment, imagine if you grew up and everybody around you knew, kind of had their main partner, which was they shared the house and the financial responsibilities and the raising the kids, but then they had a couple of others that they would have their other sexual relations with. If that was normal for you,
in
Mormons.
other countries.
then there would be less of a...
A man from Nigeria I was talking to the other day, and he was talking about how he grew up, and he said, my dad had lots of wives, and I didn't, because now his dad's dead and he's an old man, and he says, I have all these, Nigeria's very poor, I have to take care of all my dad's wives, make sure they all have food, like 5 of them.
Yeah.
And
So it's
just cultural.
Yeah, it's a matter of evaluation. I mean, and if you look at, for example, I am by no means of the stretch of the imagination an expert on this, but I have heard that in societies that do have polygamy, that tends to be more unstable. What happens if, let's say that you're a car lover, right? And you've got one car, and your neighbour's got 3 really nice cars.
Who's got 3?
Your neighbour.
Oh, yeah.
And his neighbour's got 10 really nice cars. What does that do to your relationship with your neighbours? Same sort of idea. There's an instability. It's basically, there's a limited resource, and you're trying to acquire as much of it as possible. And so it actually creates a sort of instability in societies. It's a separate issue, but the whole idea of, as I say that because you don't want to sort of say too much, then if it's okay in society, then it makes it okay. It might be okay in terms of being acceptable, but it's still maybe counterproductive to a stable system. But going back to the earlier point was exactly that. In order for you not to claim a sense of possessiveness, you need to be detached. The problem with a society that is normal and having more than one partner is that level of possessiveness simply gets transferred to all of your partners.
Right.
It's not that when you have 2 kids, your sense of possessiveness gets halved. You have a 3rd kid and it gets halved, cut down by 2/3. The more children I have, the more detached I get from all of them. It doesn't work that way. Your attachment and possessiveness just keeps on adding as you add more children. Same thing. If you add another partner, guess what happens? Your attachment and possessiveness flows out towards that person now as well.
It's interesting, I know 2 polyamorous families. The one family is fully engaged in their relative communities and they are miserable, all of them. It doesn't work. The other family is they have home businesses that they make things. One's a blacksmith, and the other's a seamstress. They are fully contained in their own little world. They don't want things out in the world. And they've been absolutely happy for 25 years.
Yeah, but again, you can't really claim to be happy if you've isolated yourself.
But I don't mean isolated. I mean, they do have contact, obviously, but they're not out there buying the new cars. They're not out there buying the new clothing like this other family is. They're not as materialistic as the second family. Let's put it that way. And they're happier than the materialistic family.
That's a separate issue. Materialism per se will make you more miserable, but you know, you've got to be a little careful with correlation and causation.
There's probably other factors why they're happier than.
And it's always-
Personality